Werner Herzog once said that human beings are like minerals. You have to subject them to intense pressure in order to find out what they are made of. That's kind of a premise of what we try to do on this show, get to know people and talk with people who have been under pressure and revealed themselves. Our next guest has written about life under pressure. He has written a novel called The Last Stand of Mr. America. He went on from the writing life to become an attorney and is doing some very interesting work in that field as well. Jason Flores Williams is an attorney practicing in Colorado, as well as being a published writer, and he joins us now. So, Jason, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you, RJ. It's a privilege.
Listen, there's so much we could talk about because I've been, following your career and reading up on it and your biography. But let's start with this. You recently filed a class action on behalf of homeless people in Denver, and I thought that was very interesting. First of all, before we even go into the class action, what do you think of the term homeless person?
Well, it's a traditional term, and but I also think it's changing, and I think what we're trying to do is use the word houseless a little bit more. Homeless is so derogatory and has this sort of, and people use it as an insult, when in actuality there are millions in America right now who are dispossessed, and what they're dispossessed of is shelter. So I think houseless is a little more apt and accurate with regard to describing what's happening in this country right now. So maybe we can use houseless.
Yeah, okay, good. That's one of the reasons why I brought it up, is that I feel it's a little derogatory too. And by the way, I was in England recently, and there they refer to it as, they don't characterize the people, they refer to it as sleeping rough. I don't know if you've heard that term, but they will say, it's estimated that 5,000 people are sleeping rough in London, that kind of thing. So I don't want to denigrate the folks, but tell us about your class action on the behalf of houseless people in Denver.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the story. About 2 years ago now, I was walking, through a kind of hip area of Denver here in downtown to go meet friends for dinner. And there was like this parking lot area, and in the parking lot, there was a woman holding her child. And surrounding this woman were two police SUV cruisers, lights bearing down on her and her kid, pressuring her and coercing her, under the threat of potential arrest, to leave the area because that's where she had found some basic human dignity, if you can find human dignity next to a dumpster. But she had found some place where at least she could be with her child. And so rather than helping her and aiding her like an actual functioning government should, they were pressurizing her and using the resources, which are our resources of the police state, to quote unquote evict her from this area. Now, I'm fully capable as the next guy of just going to dinner and ignoring all the injustice around me, but not this time. And so I saw that, and then I began looking at the issues that were happening in Denver. And what's been going on in Denver is something called the homeless sweeps, which are mass systemic policies by the city of Denver, a city that is really exploding right now, emerging as a major American city, billions of dollars in growth, to evict and chase out and injure the houseless people who are living in the areas where economic developers are eyeballing and targeting to, develop new luxury condominiums and things like that so that they can make a buck. So as usual, all this boils down to is the same old story in America right now, which is putting profits over people, and in this case, putting profits over the fundamental constitutional rights of human beings.
Yeah, and to me, I think that's so important. First of all, I used to live on the West Coast where, Santa Monica, again, too, all over the country, people are finding that that their rights are being violated because it's just not good for property values in a certain area. And you get people, sometimes when you talk about houseless individuals in this crisis, you get people saying, well, I'm sympathetic, but, I'm uncomfortable and I don't feel safe and all that. as if the only two choices were leaving people on the streets or just incarcerating them and harassing them. The piece that gets left out of the formula is, well, how about we provide some care for people who need care, and how about we put in some policies to make sure that nobody goes without shelter in this United States of America?
Oh, whoa, come on, RJ. You're talking about pragmatic and creative solutions here in the United States 2018. I think we're not really in the creative and pragmatic solutions business anymore. But you bring up an interesting point. Is part of what, and this is, I think, fairly common, but it's nonetheless noteworthy, is that part of what Denver did in their policies of the homeless sweeps was that they used inmates from the county jail in Denver Metro to actually affect the sweeps, to be the front lines in countering the houseless individuals. And so if you start to think about it, what this really all falls under is the aegis of the war on the poor. I was going to say war on poverty. It's not. It's criminalizing the poor here in the United States. But it's just, I want to use the word ironic, but it's just horrific. So you think about, they arrest people for violating, these ordinances that are designed to push them out, put them into jail, and then use them to sweep out other poor persons. This is the sort of thing that you wouldn't expect to happen in China, but it's happening in major American cities, especially Denver right now.
So, what this gets to also, and again, we're talking with attorney Jason Flores Williams, when we talk about criminalizing houselessness, when we talk about taking what is essentially a human and social problem, a problem of greed and inequality and poverty and injustice, and giving it a carceral, police, paramilitary solution, what we're really talking about, in my estimation, but I want to hear your thoughts, and this gets to your own life story perhaps, but what this really gets to is living in a nation state that views policing, which in this country has become, as I say, a paramilitary operation more often than not, views this kind of paramilitary police enforcement as the go-to solution for problems that should be addressed in a social and economic context. We've got a problem of mass incarceration. We've got a problem of over-policing. We've got a problem of young people shot dead on the street for the color of their skin. To me, I don't know. I'm thrilled and delighted that you're filing this class action. I wish you all the best of luck in it. But my hope for that action is that it becomes another signpost for the public to think, what, we cannot police our way or militarize our way out of being in an unjust society.
That's interesting. Well, I'll start with this analogy. This is, again, another story. There was about 2 weeks ago, I had a court appearance, and after the court appearance, I was going to talk to high school students. And what I can tell you is that when I went to the courthouse, comparing the courthouse that I went to, which is in Jefferson County here, people call it the Taj Mahal, and comparing all the courthouses I go to the public schools where I actually talk to kids, the courthouses, and I think people are going to know this is coming, are beautiful compared to the schools where I visit. So you can first off tell where all the emphasis and where all of the money is going and where our society is putting its focus. That said, so that's one. Two is that when I go into a courthouse now, I basically don't view it as a courthouse. I don't view it as a place where I'm going to, I do fight for constitutional rights and I do fight for justice, but it's not a place of justice. What it is the gateway, the portal to one of the largest corporations in America, which is mass incarceration. So when I go into a courthouse now, I'm thinking I'm just going into the headquarters, where this is the processing plant, where they're going to take the product, which is unfortunately human beings and American citizens who have fundamental rights, and then use the pain and suffering of those people. And I'll be frank, some of these people, I like to say, were sentenced to prison 50 years before they were born due to the environmental conditions in which they were born, due to the poverty in which they were born, due to the lack of access that they've had all their entire lives. This was the path that they were designed for. even prior to being born. And so now that path is realized. And now these products, which are actually human beings, end up going into a mass incarceration, which we talked about before, the way that the houseless are arrested and then used and forced into arresting and sweeping other houseless people. Well, my empathy also goes toward these lower class areas, just rural America and whole entire regions of the country that are dependent now on the prison industrial complex for their survival. The prison guards, the cafeterias, all of the economies that are associated with the prison industrial complex now. We are at a point in this country where if you were to remove the prison industrial complex, I think the entire country's economy would begin to collapse. So we are invested, wedded to, and completely embedded with incarceration and the imprisonment of a large section of our own populace for our own economic survival. I couldn't imagine a situation that would more be geared toward violating just basic human dignities and constitutional rights as this one.
And I'm just, as I listen to you talk, Jason Flores Williams, I'm thinking to myself, gee, when else in our nation's history have human bodies been commodified for the economic benefit of others? Didn't we have a name for that? And didn't we have a constitutional amendment that supposedly made that illegal? You know, in economic terms, the human bodies being incarcerated would be described as inputs, not human beings, but inputs. And you're absolutely right. We spend a fortune on it. The great radical writer Jessica Mitford in the 1960s pointed out that at that point anyway, that the cost of incarcerating someone in federal prison was almost annually, was almost exactly the same as the annual cost of sending someone to Harvard University. So she proposed that it might be interesting to arrange an exchange program between the two institutions. But with that in mind, okay, how do we raise awareness of the fact that, sure, some people break the law, that's understood, but we don't have a system where it's just a matter of when you break the law, there's going to be proportional punishment. We have a system where, for example, private prison contractors write contracts that say their prisons will be X percent, 98% full all the time. We have lobbyists, we have, you know, all sorts of deals being made back and forth to keep this system in place. This is not about justice, this is about dollars. What do we do to raise public awareness of that?
Well, you know, I know that what your listeners would like is for me to give a tight little answer that will take us step by step in the way to getting ourselves out of the mess and the morass of the prison industrial complex, this cancer at the very heart of our country has put us in. But I don't have any easy answers. I'll tell you that, so I have clients at a place called Sterling Correctional Facility, which is around the Colorado-Nebraska border. And about once a week I have to drive out there because one is, what I found is that attorney communications with their client, even though they're supposed to be protected, are frequently recorded. So I don't feel like I'm representing my client the way I should be, and that his Sixth Amendment rights to counsel are being respected in our phone call. So I'm compelled to drive several hours out to Sterling. On the drive out to Sterling, the first thing that'll hit you is the smell of, and I don't know what words I can use on your channel, so I'll just say manure, because there are feedlots, mass corporate feedlots on the way out there. So the entire place smells literally as you're moving toward this prison. On the way to the prison, what you'll see also is it's completely trashed out. The entire areas where you once thought that we're being taken care of, or at least being respected by the people who are supposedly supposed to be working the land and concerned for the nature of our environment, you know, the salt of the earth people in our heartland, the area is completely trashed. So along with being completely trashed, it also smells horrific. You get to the prison, and on the way into the prison, all you'll see are billboards saying, "God bless Donald Trump and Mike Pence." So this is almost like a descent into hell. But you know, sometimes you can't do anything other than laugh as you're getting into this. Then you get to the prison, and almost invariably, every time I go into the prison, I end up having to spend about 4 or 5 more hours than I would like to there because it's so violent. Some people call it the killing fields, that it actually always goes on lockdown. So I end up being in prison because there's been some killing or an attempted murder while I'm there trying to represent my client, who in many cases, although this is a prison, who are doing cases that are out, what we say on the streets that are actually in American courts, even though they're presumed innocent. So at a certain point, what I want to, I guess, the reason I can't give you an easy answer or be very sanguine about it is I think for a very long time in our nation's history, we always thought that those people in the heartland and the heartland communities, that they were guided by a certain kind of common sense about what a good nation should be and what a healthy society is. But every time I go to Sterling, I'm just reminded that the heart of this country, in a way, it's diseased. And I'm wondering how we're going to get ourselves out of this state of disease.
Well, and I can tell you, and unfortunately we're going to run out of time because, we have a lot we could talk about. I grew up in Utica, New York, upstate New York, which has been devastated economically by all sorts of greedy mass moves. And I'm not trying to come up with some simplistic solutions either, but, really the only employer of note there is the correctional industry. They have Mid-State Correctional Facility, they have Marcy Correctional Facility, they have Mohawk Correctional Facility, all within a short drive of Utica. That's basically the only jobs you can get up there in certain parts of that area. And so we've got to somehow, it's going to be more than you and I can handle, at least in one conversation, but we're going to have to somehow break this spiral of where everybody is kept chained to some sort of dependency. The people who aren't locked up are given no alternative. And unfortunately, as I said, we're not going to be able to handle it here, but as always, good to hear about what you're doing. Good to finally speak with you in person, Jason Flores Williams. And I hope you come back and talk to us again sometime.
I'd love to, Rich. Thank you.